Welcome, everybody. My name's Vicky Hanna, and I'm taking our session for a brand new unit, HLTWHS003. So this runs for 2 sessions in our live classes, and I'm going to be providing you with the slides to be able to assist you with this. There's also a great learner's guide that comes with this. Workplace health and safety is actually a requirement under Fair Work Australia. Australia has very good workplace health and safety measures, and I would like to cover some of these. So your study around this and your assessments around this are very much within the framework of the legislation, Workplace Health and Safety Act, which can look a little different in every state and territory. So there's a little bit of background research for you to be able to have a look. But look, let's get started. Back, let me just open up that screen for us. And hopefully that's nice and clean for you to be able to see what I can see. I've actually got the page, but I've also got the other slides just there. There's quite a lot of notes I want to refer to. You're also going to be getting a copy of these as well as part of your resources. What do you need to be able to do this particular unit? It's an important one. For some of you, you'll be just starting with your studies, and for some others, this may be the very end of your studies with your diploma level. So this unit also is a higher standard. We're going to cover this because at a diploma level, you are often the person that others will report to. So I want to unpack a little bit around your responsibilities if you find yourself as a team leader or a program manager, but also the responsibilities that we have as an individual in the workplace. Workplace health and safety is no longer something that it only sits with the employer or is only there to protect the clients. It's actually there to protect you as the worker as well. But with those rights, also have responsibilities. This is a changing space. We are now incorporating a lot of other elements into workplace health and safety. Once psychological safety, mental health and well-being was not in under the legislation. In some states and territories, it now is. I'm based on Tarraballan, Bundaland in Queensland, and it was introduced in October 2023. What's your state or territory like? And make sure that you refer to that as well. We give you the resources, and you will be accessing a lot of additional resources for your assessments in your first access, our simulated workplace dashboard, which is full of policies and procedures and templates, and it really models a service. You may be working in the sector, but you may not. And so HADA provides you with an organisation that's hypothetical, but it's very realistic. And I find that it compares beautifully with even our government dashboards as well. So it's a very high standard. The other assessment tool that you have with this is your learner's guide. And I encourage you to go through that, keep that as a resource and refer to that with your assessment questions and your pieces that you must write for us, and then also for any of your practitioner skills, which of course are often seen as role plays or a presentation. So you have 2 elements that you need to be deemed competent. One is your knowledge, your underpinning knowledge on the unit subject, and also your skills, your ability to be able to apply that knowledge to meet industry standards in the workplace. Okay, I'll do our acknowledgement to country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the very first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land and our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past and present. I extend this acknowledgement out to anyone who would be watching this who identifies as being part of First Nation and Torres Strait Island population in Australia, and also acknowledge that the lands have never been ceded. A little bit of housekeeping as we study. We're balancing often life. We're adult learners in this space, but it is important to when you get this recording to still balance how you look after yourself. So be kind to yourself, make sure you take time to step away from your studies. I know the workload is pretty heavy with the diploma level, but when you do come to classes and live class, we want you to be very interactive. It's a respectful professional zone, and when we step into classes, we are colleagues and we are peers. If there's anything there at all that you're concerned about, a trigger warning, some of the information may bring something up for you, just know that you need to step away a little and do some self-care. We're going to have this from time to time in the workplace anyway, so it's best practice to make sure that if there's something there that's a little uncomfortable, if it's something that's still sitting with us at least 30 minutes afterwards, do a call to Lifeline 13 11 14. We work with students all the time. I'm still a volunteer and have been since 1987. I love my work that I do with Lifeline. It's a very low amount of commitment for me, but I do want to let you know that it's a very welcome 24/7 free service on the other end of that call. If you are First Nation or Torres Strait Island person, you can ring 13 Yarn, also managed by the Lifeline model. Every single person that's a Lifeline telephone counsellor will be able to give you information about resources that are available in your local area or be able to assist you. Very important when we're talking about workplace health and safety. Your organisation may also have EAP, Employee Assistance Program. All the best organisations do. And you can talk about life balance, work balance, any other things that are happening. Often that is also opened up to members of your family. So self-care is important, and safety. Okay, pop myself back up there. Yeah. So this unit is HLTWHS003, maintain work health and safety. Please ignore session 1 of 4. We've capsuled this. I'm doing our recording in just this alone. And then, of course, I'm sending out the recording of our class discussion as well straight after this. This is the theory side. Make sure that you've got your learner's guide. You will need that to be able to get some of the information that you're looking for to answer your assessments. So this session, HLTW polling starts. This particular unit covers AOD and, of course, youth work. It covers individual support, and it also covers early childhood. So this is something across all aspects of people who work in the community sector, and it's under the Fair Work Australia requirements to provide a safe workplace for our employees and the resources to be able to make that happen. Let's unpack it a little bit. relevant to your studies, of course. So a hazard, strategies and risks, and this is what we're going to cover. What are some strategies and what are some of the risk controls that you can implement to manage those as well? In your learner's guide, it will have you do some activities, but what I'd like you to do right now is to just have a look around your space, have a look at your workstation. Wherever you're watching this recording, just have a think about what's your posture like, what's some hazards, can you identify any of these hazards that are sitting there at the moment? Are there any cords, any spills? Is there some, as a person who identifies as neurodivergent, I find that the lighting is extremely important for me. Someone with autism will often say that to you as well. However, I have bought devices that can reduce that for me. So I can reduce the lighting. I can increase the lighting to make it brighter. I can make the lighting white and I can make the lighting warm. All of those I find, while it might only seem like a small thing, it actually can make us quite comfortable. I work from home. I need to make sure that my close environment here, it's everything I have as a person who identifies neurodivergent. We need to make reasonable adjustments in the workplace. It's a requirement under Fair Work Australia. It's like I have lots of fidgets. I work that way. I have that I can use. All of those are what we refer to as reasonable adjustments. Some of mine are hidden and easy workarounds. You might do little things that just you may doodle, or you might write, or you might have lots of different ways that you work, little things around you. But then there's also people who are in the workplace who may be a wheelchair user, may be hearing impaired, and may be visually impaired as well. So all of these sit under Workplace Health and Safety and Fair Work Australia. So we must provide the resources to do the work as an employer, and you as a team leader or program manager must make sure that your team have those things as well. But what about our clients when they step into that to do? What must we know, and where are our responsibilities in that space as well? Let's have a look. So I'll just move me up a little bit here. Okay, great. So a PCBU refers to, just in general terms, of course, our sector has lots of acronyms we like to shorten, but it means a person conducting business or an undertaking. That's your client, the employer, if you're a sole trader, an association or an incorporation as well. You could be in a government department. The word is subcontractor. You are covered when you go out on work placement by HLTWHS003. We have a certificate of currency where you are insured in that space. So there are requirements that we must meet. So for this case, a PCBU is the person who would be viewed as your employer or the host employer. To harm a person. Some of your assessment asks you to assess the risk, the possibility that harm could occur, like extremely possible or unlikely. There's a scale in there. Risk control. What action must you take? What does the law and legislation require? And what's reasonably practical? To be able to do it. Cannot cause undue harm. Employer has rights in this space as well. So the aims of workplace health and safety: a safe workplace, keep workers safe, set requirements which are governed overarching by the legislation, and a clear definition of what the employer or the host employer for students going out on work placement are required to do. And that is the undertaking that they must do by law. in our class, we talk about that, and we will. However, I'd like you to explore in this moment of reflection, just to take a moment right here and reflect on what responsibilities and rights that you believe an employee may have in relation to workplace health and safety. And let's give that a little bit of reflection as well. Okay. So employee rights, all people are responsible for workplace health and safety in the workplace. So if you've been given an orientation, you've gone through your policies and procedures, you may not have absorbed everything, but you certainly have access to those, and that is your responsibility. Okay, it's your responsibility to make sure that you are fully aware of what the policies and procedures are, and for you to work inside the scope of your position description, your role. So you have a process to report workplace health and safety. So some of the more visible, easier things to recognise are a spill on the floor, put a wet floor sign up. Bullying and harassment, if you know that that is happening, bullying is persistent, not a one-off thing, but if it continually happens and you walk past that, you can be in breach of the legislation. You must report it as an incident. Follow your policies and procedures on how do I report something. So that sits inside the psychological safety. Some other things, like when we were going through COVID, we had our personal protection gear that we were using, our PPEs. We had signs like 1.5 meters distance, wash hands, all those kind of things. Probably the most important turning point and recognition of how do we bring safe practices in as an employee, as a client, and as an employer. Otherwise, workplace health and safety was kind of like something that we knew we had to do, but we weren't as informed or educated or aware about that. Yes, we recognise those hazard signs. Pictures will definitely communicate, and it crosses a lot of language barriers. But even our language, a cultural safety in the workplace comes under workplace health and safety as well. Okay. So there's a process in your organisation, and there's a requirement by law. Part of your assessment work is to explore what is that like in your state or territory, and reference that when you're doing your answers as well. Where did you get that information? Was it evidence-based? And put your reference in there with your answers. Another reflection point is, what do you think are the rights and responsibilities of an employer in relation to workplace health and safety in the community services sector? So because we work with vulnerable people in our community, we have a higher responsibility, their rights. So we bring into Workplace Health and Safety Human Rights Commission as well. There's just an additional, because in the community services sector, our overarching values base is duty of care. So we need to ensure that it's fair, accessible, and there's equity. It isn't always only about those physical disabilities. It isn't always around the psychological impact. It could be that we're working with very vulnerable, trauma-impacted clients. I'm going to add a few additional resources specifically around psychological safety, and just some lens over what's it like for us in this space, especially around our youth work specifically as well. But this crosses all community services sector. So an employer must give you the resources to be able to do the job in an environment that is safe to do so. It's pretty simple, but not everyone gets that right. So employer rights and responsibilities, according to Safe Work Australia, there's a duty of care, and it's required to eliminate any risks, health and safety where possible, and if not, to minimise, to try and manage that as much as they possibly can. So intention is everything. Yes, people do get those things wrong because we can't have complete oversight. Some things we have no control over, things like natural disasters and other people, what they're doing. But their intention. So where the law sits here, and you as a program manager or a team leader at a diploma level, your requirement seriously will sit around what was your intention and what did you do from the moment you became aware of that. That is where the law sits. So it could be that all reasonable management efforts were made, and only a court will decide that. So policies will ask you to fill in an incident report. What do you do with that once you've done it? All of these have an action point within 12 hours, within 24 hours. It's the same as our mandatory reporting. It's governed by law. There's legislations in every state and territory, and your organisation will have its very own policies and procedures. Sometimes, if you're funded by Department of Education or Child Safety or Department of Housing, depending on where you are, there can be an additional set of requirements as well. And that can include the upskilling and training of the team. So I like to bring the policies and procedures into every team meeting every week. Every trainer at Hayter works outside in the sector as well. So yes, we're a night RTO, but we're also workers who are working every day in the sector. So the Workplace Health and Safety Act, check your state and territory for the currency of it. You will be asked to cite that in your written work. It might be the Workplace Health and Safety Act from 2011, but I know that in Queensland in 2023, we had an amendment to that. We need all of the currency when you're answering your assessment. Just think about that a little bit more because it's a changing space. So the Act is federal legislation, but have a look at your state and territories, and it's meant to be promoting as an ongoing manner. Workplace health and safety, that's our language, things we do, things we say, and the things that we use and as implements in our day-to-day. Even the workload that you put on someone, you cannot, by law, Fair Work Australia would say you cannot increase somebody's position description by greater than 15% over a period of time that's reasonable. So you sign up for a contract and you say, this is what we agree we're going to do. No longer, of course, it can be added, but it doesn't fly when it comes to Fair Work Australia. So, and other duties from time to time. That means that you've reached an agreement that you have capacity to do that. And therefore, when someone asks you to do that, like, do you have the time? The responsibility is ours, yours and mine, to say, I can't, but I could complete it within this timeline. So it's fair and reasonable to be asked by an employer, but it's also your responsibility to say if you cannot manage that, or you could, and what you would need to make that happen. So it's not all on the employer, it is also on the employee. You are both part of your employment contract. So there's rights, but there's also responsibilities for both parties. It's a legal contract we enter into. So you have the responsibility to identify risks, eliminate or control those risks, promote the welfare of people at work. We do that peer-to-peer, protect people, and report any injury or illness or a hazard, and follow your policies and procedures. And that's the same for both parties, employer, employees. That means paid or unpaid. So volunteer or on work placement, you have a duty. Here we have the workplace health and safety legislation, codes of practice, interpretive guidelines, state and territory. We've covered a little bit around that. So the next updates were done in 2012, the federal law, but there's lots of changes. When do they happen? Usually with a change of government, there's amendments. So always stay on top of that. Work cover is workers' compensation. We actually talked to you a little bit about that. It's not an ideal process to go through, but you absolutely have the right to be protected. And if there was an injury, you have the right to make a claim. So there are governing bodies. We're going to ask you to talk about that. How would I assist someone? Let's say we get a client that comes in who has a diagnosis of PTSD, and it's situational based on an incident or an event that happened to them. They may be struggling throughout the process of making the claim. They may be unable to go to work, and their mental health may be suffering. It could be that we've got a young person whose psychological health and well-being has been impacted with a workplace incident. It could be a physical one, or it could be a psychological one, or it could be a natural disaster, part of fires, part of floods. These are the things that impact our community. And so we may find ourselves as a worker assisting someone navigate the complexities around this as well. It may be us, but it may actually be our client as well. For us to be able to assist our access the resources and have a general understanding as well, to be able to guide them. So just know that every state work to and our employment contract, I refer to that as the scope of my role. If you're brand new, you're entry level, no court would ever expect you to hold full responsibility. If you've only been there 2 weeks, the onus is fully on the employer, because they are to not give you tasks where you would be placed at risk. Okay, so that's what orientation is about, onboarding as well. Industry guidelines, they relate to a standard. Some must work within the requirements that sit under the funding. So there's a performance framework that sits under there as well. It's a lot, I know, very complex. I am a person who loves policy and procedure, and I love writing policy, and sit in some working groups around public policy as well, mostly around probation and parole boards and things like that. But workplace health and safety have one. So we all need to be involved, included, and invested in improving this space. So if you've got a policy and procedure that isn't effective, then we as a worker need to give a little bit of feedback from the bottom up. Often we will manage from the bottom up, and your employer has written it. But if it's not working and it's not effective, your employer wants to hear that. Your program manager or team leader or your supervisor, they need to hear that. One, they want you to say and identify, and two, they want you to come up with a strategy which could improve it. There's the rights and responsibilities. So think about that. Go, yep, I see this, but I think this may be better. I might raise that in a group. Okay, so there's other units where we actually unpack some workplace health and safety. It can sit around communication. It's very important to be able to find your voice around that as well. You may advocate for your clients and other members of the public, but it's also for yourself and your peers, your colleagues that you work with. Sorry, I went past that a little too quickly. A very governed area is under NDIS. So some of our clients may or may not be, or may be interested in being covered and additional support around that. The NDIS Code of Conduct is very clear. It is free to go and do the NDIS worker orientation modules. Go to the Human Rights Commission website and have a look at those. You can get certificates, and that is great to add to your portfolio of your knowledge and your skills resume. I like to get my team to do this twice a year as a refresher, like most policies and procedures. Keep it there at the surface rather than I did that. Now we need to renew our first aid. We renew our mental health first aid. We need to renew our working with children, positive notice, and also if we have an NDIS yellow card, a screening card as well. So these things need to be refreshed. It's not just do it once and leave. We need to make sure that we have currency and that we're maintaining that standard. And if there's any changes, that we implement those changes as well. They're good sites to go to. So your industry standards, have a look at your guidelines, senior policies and procedures. It will relate to a standard, it might be child safety, developed with consultation with industry and peak bodies. Youth workers, oftentimes it will be Child Safety Act and Human Rights, Fair Work Australia, and unions. So let's talk about unions just briefly. It is absolutely entirely up, and you have free choice to join a union in Australia. Not a requirement. There's no such thing anymore as we are a union workplace. You have the right to join and you have the right not to join. Now, I joined my union very, very late because I've always had business, or I've always been able to advocate on my own behalf. The only reason that I joined the union was because I wanted their ongoing professional development. They have certificates, and you're liaising with other program managers and team leaders. I like that space, but look, really, I've never used a union to put in a complaint or anything like that. I have a voice of my own, but that's not the case for all, and it's not the case for all of our clients as well. But it's personal. No one can pressure you to join a union, and no one can stop you from joining a union. Now, that was not the case once. Now it definitely is. So that's entirely up to you. I haven't got an opinion one way or the other than my own personal one. And that, of course, should not influence you. The reason I do it, like I said, is really because I like the training, and it's free if I'm a union member, which kind of like makes, I can save myself thousands of dollars a year, and I can claim my membership as a tax deduction as well. But, like, do I utilize it a lot? No, about once a month I'll jump in and I do that, but I can find other free training, and so can you. You definitely don't have to join a union, but your union is your representative when it comes to workplace health and safety and the industrial relations under Fair Work Australia. So a reflection point, which we discuss in our live classes, of what are some of the standards or the code of practice relating to community and social services. How might these relate to workplace health and safety, psychological safety, and your own self-care? So when you're reflecting on this, keep in mind, yes, your rights, and the other side of that coin are your responsibilities. Use that as a reflection point. According to Safe Work Australia, a hazard is a situation of a thing that has the potential to harm a person. Hazardous, so lifting, there's recommendations, it can be environmental. We might be working with chemicals or substances. I find in my day, we have sharps spaces placed around because we may come across sharps needles if someone has been doing that. Even when you're looking after housing, if you discover in the course of your work, of course, if it takes you into the housing and homelessness area, that there can be people who set up a lab. So that has to have a bioclean, so that's a biohazard, and you cannot put someone in that room or that area until it's got the clearance. So that's a requirement under the law. There's a lot of real estate agents that struggle with that space. So a bond clean is not enough. How do they measure what's happening in suburb by suburb? By testing the water and the waste management from time to time, whether that is prevalent. And it's interesting because the Australian Bureau of Statistics will often use those postcodes that can have a silver lining. Those postcodes may provide evidence that there's a greater need for funding to go into substance misuse, but it also flags that area as maybe lower socioeconomic. Certainly they chose those areas for the cashless debit card as well, which of course was a previous government being introduced. The current government, we don't have that, they removed it. But should the government change, everybody in receipt of any form of payment, whether it's parenting payments, tax benefits, whatever, will all be finding that they're dealing with the cashless debit card, where all of your social payments that are under that will then be controlled by the government and a third party, and only X amount of those dollars will be disposable income, 25%, and 75% will be controlled, and those payments will be made by a third party. You will lose access to that. Now, I say that because this is an area that our clients are definitely going to be impacted by. They were impacted when it was first introduced, but know that this will come with a change of any government. If it returns to that government, I'm not going to mention which government, but I'm just letting you know the government policy of the day changes and does impact the laws and the public policy and how we do our work. We need to be aware and have views around that so that we can best help our clients. That's where mental health comes in. Okay, so it's about navigating the spaces within the guidelines of the laws. The government of the day makes those laws. Okay, so it's something for us to be very mindful of. So we might hear our clients talk about Centrelink or the government or bosses and things like that. This is all workplace health and safety for them. This is all health and safety for them. And that's what this unit is about. It's also yours. If you're dealing with people who are greatly impacted by fire or flood or a huge change in their finances, that financial hardship, this makes your job harder, and your well-being is the priority here as well. Okay, so that's a reflection point I want you to have a think about. So how do we identify the hazards? I've raised it can be change in legislation, but it can be something that we see, something that we do. We'll do a risk assessment. Does that have the potential for harm, no matter what area that you identify as the hazard or potential hazard? What's the risk? And then our role often around procedures, how do we manage and control the risk? So for you, it might be that you'll do your casework slightly differently, or you might debrief your team a little differently, or you might need to have a debrief to talk about what that's like. Not all hazards and risks are wet floor, slippery or wobbly handrails. Sometimes they're hidden hazards. We need to be mindful of all of them. We're studying at a diploma level. Hazards and risks and harms, and the harms that they can cause. How do we manage that? We write a report, we speak to our appropriate person, we pass that on, must have an action. You might have a program that you report into. We use in my workplace a program called RiskMan, which is risk management. And it flags it up and it color codes it. Some of your assessments are based exactly like that. And if it's electrical, it needs to be isolated and a tag put on it. That needs to be done every year or 2 years, even your laptops and things like that in the workplace. And then we must notify. It's not passive. We don't just enter it in. It must go to another person where an action is required. It's not enough to report. There's step 3. We must manage and control that. So when completing a risk assessment, you should consider what might happen if a person is exposed. That is where your responsibility sits. If you saw it and you noted it and you did know more, then that actually is you failing in your responsibility. There's a requirement for you to take action. And if it's not working, let your supervisor know. I think we could improve this space. So conditions change, equipment needs, might be that you've got an ergonomic chair that you need for someone, a larger screen, breaks, making sure you take those, staying hydrated, lots of different things sit around workplace health and safety, and communication, even our language, our wording. A joke is only a joke if the other person welcomes it and also joins in and agrees with you that it's funny. Otherwise, it's a spike. It's a harmful action, and it sits under workplace health and safety, under psychological safety. How we report feedback, is it effective, and ongoing training, education and awareness. Be familiar, get to know this area. It's important. It's there for you and for our clients. How do we determine the severity of harm? We need to go through these checkpoints. These are your open-ended questions. Could a failure in one system lead to other failures? That's how we do risk assessment. That's the potential for harm. We're always doing this for our clients. We start off our session with our clients about privacy and confidentiality. That's part of the safety mechanism, but it's also part of the requirement under law, under the Privacy and Confidentiality Act. It's about consent. It's about getting permission, and it's about ensuring that we have created a safe environment. So even exposure to noise, workload, and biological samples, you might need to be tested. So repetitive noise, bad lighting, those environmental things, very important to have a good workplace that's safe for us. If you work from home, make sure that you do those things as well. Same when we're studying. So it's like the likelihood of harm. Here are the classifications: rare, unlikely, possible, very likely, certain to occur. So extremely likely might be another way to say certain. So there's areas there for you to refer to. I say that because I know this is in your assessment. You're going to be tested on that as well. Let's have a look at what this looks like here. So we have a look at the likelihood as opposed to the cause. So cause and effect. So it could be that it's very likely and it sits there, or it's in these colours. Now, not everyone can see colour the same way. Make sure that it's fair and equitable. I know one person in our team at HADA is colourblind, but don't just assume that people know how to see colour or how to read English as well. A lot of those signs are there, but for you, it has the word written in there as well. So I can refer to colour blindness because I work with people, and there are variations around workplace health and safety for our colleagues as well. So I need to make what we refer to as a reasonable adjustment. And they have an aid when they're at work with their cursor. If they put that on, it will actually say the colour if the colour is not written down. So if they put their cursor over this square here where I am, it would say yellow. It also says medium. So yellow in this coding is a medium impact and a likely risk. That is where I am there. Medium impact and likely to be a risk. That is going to form part of your assessments. So a little bit more. So this is a risk matrix. Sorry, let me just move that up a little bit for us. And you're going to be asked to assess what that would look like. And in summary, so some of the questions that we've covered tonight and reflections is around how to identify a hazard, strategies to be able to apply, and our responsibilities and our rights. What are some risk controls that we must put in, go through your learner's guide? And then what is workplace health and safety for us in the community sector, in particular at a level where you're studying around a diploma, that we may have a higher area that we are required. So you can do HLTWHS001. This one is HLTWHS003, which is the higher level of learning. So I want to say thank you to everybody for this particular unit, and then we'll send out some more resources to get started on your assessments. Go into your learners portal, watch your recordings, your answers to the questions in the assessment are sitting in your learner's guide, and also a little bit of research for you to go to your state or territory under the work cover. And we even ask you to do a bit of research around other states and territories. So I hope you found that interesting, helpful. Not everyone thinks that workplace health and safety is exciting, but it definitely is important. It's a requirement, and it's a unit that we need to make sure that we are competent and confident in applying in our workplace. So I'll close off. For this is part of our recording for this. The next time that we come together in a live class will be to actually discuss our assessments. We have completed our academic side and our key learnings and knowledge. Now we're going to jump into assessment work and our skills side of this. So thank you, everyone.